Hey, weather fans, checking out the updated information on the severe storms that are occurring tonight. Looking across the radar right now, I just turned the winds and the lightning on, looking at the current outlook right now as it moves across into the Midwest, into the Missouri region right now, and north adjacent of the Missouri region. Right up here, you can see that's just, general thunderstorm. Looks like a lot of rain, a lot of thunder and lightning, torrential rainfall. Doesn't look like much in the way of hail or anything severe at this point right now. I think this is the sub-severe portion north of that warm front that's coming through. But this little tail that's cutting across the warm front, that is the beginning of what is going to be happening tonight. So you can see it kind of starting. These white hazes that are here is that cloud cover, and you can see in between that this is that break in those cloud cover in these areas here where you're getting that daytime heating. So I didn't know how the cloud coverage was going to be today. Now we're kind of seeing it a little bit. We've got some cloud cover up here, mostly hazy and overcast and most of these areas, but you do have some breaks in the clouds in here, and that is going to be a problem for the daytime heating, further extending the destabilization of the atmosphere in these areas. Alright, so then of course we got the cold front over here with the westerlies coming in with the winds, and then you got southwesterlies coming in here from the south with those winds up to the warm front, and that's gonna that's gonna make a lot of instability. Also, to be able to get supercell spinning up with that kind of different directions and wind shear, and not to mention it's pretty sufficient wind shear. It's actually pretty strong. A lot of winds going into this area right now. Now, if I go over to, I gotta go to my thing here for a minute. All right, so if we go over here, the Storm Prediction Center's website right here, we were looking at the instrumentation this morning, and it wasn't very impressive. But now that things are starting to kind of brew up here before the evening storms come, you can see that low pressure system with that cold front that's now moving over to the coast, to the border of Missouri and Arkansas. That dry line still in that kind of area a little bit further east in Texas as it moves across. Then you got the warm front there, and so you got that warm front there that's going to be there. So anyways, we're going to look at some of the data that's going on here and the current conditions. You see that warm sector that's going on in southern Missouri over Arkansas, and it gets warmer as you go into the Arklatex region, 86 in northern Louisiana, 79 in Arkansas. We already got 75 and mid-60s to upper 60s in Missouri. So that's that warm sector that you're seeing. Very, very high dew points as well, over 60s. Everywhere I look over here, we're looking at dew points over 60, and that's that wet sector that's going to make that that atmosphere over this area that much more unstable. Looking at the surface cape levels, we're already getting 2000s, anywhere from 1000 to 2000 in surface cape levels. So you can see that there's a lot of instability going up into the atmosphere in these areas right now. That wind shear that I was talking about, already 50 to 60 knot wind shear going through Missouri right now. Very, very sufficient winds being able to really ramp these storms up. And that surface vortice here, that's what I was talking about this morning with the weather outlook that I put out. We didn't really have a whole lot of surface vortice going on in this area, but now you can see these spots of surface vortice that are kicking up here and now moving east into the vicinity of Missouri. And that is that intensifying system in the atmosphere, probably at higher levels, because that's really where these storms kind of crank up and start at, is up 40, 50,000 feet in the atmosphere. So you're getting those top cells that are kind of moving into Missouri here with that surface vortice ramping up. So, supercell composite is already pretty thick over Missouri right here, so you can see that whole entire blanket of instability with supercell composite, where you're getting that wide, broad sector of a lot of supercell development in this area. Now, tornado parameters, same thing I said earlier this morning. We had one indice of 1. Now we have a whole entire area right here centralized over Missouri with the level of 1, and now we're getting a 2 in there as well. So that tornado parameter is now ramping up and starting to get ready to roll these severe storms out through the evening into the overnight hours. Helicity is not that impressive, but we do have that kind of wide area of that solid green line, which is a little bit higher of an indice of helicity. I think that this is going to change. I think it's going to change several times throughout the night, because I think that there's going to be certain periods throughout these storms where that helicity is going to go up and down. You know what I mean? It's going to weaken, it's going to intensify, it's going to weaken, it's intensify. It all depends on how the atmosphere adjusts throughout the storms progressing tonight further to the east and northeast. So I'm looking at the possibility of some of these cells just, you know, kind of taking off and running towards the northeast. So eventually through Missouri, at least into that area where it's going to take off, and they're going to run towards the northeast into Illinois, and that's where that that convection system is kind of covering, you know, a broad sector of the half, you know, the southern half region of Illinois. That's going through there. So that's that helicity. It's going to kind of ramp it up, ramp it, you know, down. I think it's going to go up and down in its organization tonight. LCL is pretty much the same as it was earlier this morning that we were looking at, 500. It's very low levels of lifting condensation height. So that's going to be a contributing factor to how severe these storms are, where they are with those low top cells, things like that, I'm kind of all taking into consideration here. The categorical outlook has changed somewhat, but not very much. It's basically stayed the same. I don't think there's very many updates to it, but I think that the National Weather Service is keeping an eye on it for any adjustments that might happen. Very moderate changes, as far as I know. You know, Ozarks to Mississippi Valley, middle of a short wave trough over the central Kansas. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much saying the same exact thing, where you're getting that land cyclone that is with that low pressure system. So this thing right here, the reason we got these, you know, kind of circles and bands around it is because you're getting that land cyclone that's centralized over that low pressure system, which you can see the winds that's just kind of intermeshing in there. So as far as the data, I figured we would take we'd take a look at a couple of different models here and see if we can get a good picture of what we think is going to be going on here tonight. I'm going to go to the high resolution model. It only gives us 2 frames. It's very, very limited at this point right now. So it goes to 19Z. It's not going to do as much good here. We'll go to the GFS and see what we see here. Alright, composite reflectivity. So I don't know what the GFS is going to read me as far as the sounding data, but let's take a quick look and see what's going on. Now here you can see that tail that's kind of popping down through that warm front into the central portions of Missouri and kind of extending down, and that's when this thing is really going to get ramped up. And it doesn't show it that profusely here, but this is, you know, these thin lines of storms, that 2 rounds that's going to be going through Missouri. This is that starting up here. It just shows kind of a broad look at it a little bit. So just ahead, we're looking at the overall atmospheric conditions ahead of that first line. Wide break in the cap right there. A lot of heat and moisture. That heat and that moisture in this area has intensified quite a bit, and I think that that daytime heating has a lot to do with that, where it's just hot and it's moist, and that's not, I don't think that's, you know, a normal condition for this time of year anywhere in the country. So that tells me that there's a lot of instability in the atmosphere. Got that wind field here with really, really sufficient, decent wind shear. Got a good looking hydrograph. Cape levels way up over 1500, 1572 right now on surface cape levels, with some supercell development. Not very high in the supercell development at this point right now in this time frame, but it isn't zero either. Significant hail. We got some hail threat with that as well. Our wind barbs are spread out a little bit, which tells me a little bit about the surface vorticity that tornadoes could be possible in that kind of area. But I think at this point in this time frame, I think they're going to be struggling to kind of get going for a little bit anyways. And then in the next frame, you can see these spotty isolated cells just kind of taping off, you know what I mean, kind of forming off of this line as it kind of goes through southern Missouri and upper Arkansas and the northern regions to eastern Arkansas. So anywhere along this line, as I was saying this morning, anywhere along this line you could have supercells popping up and developing along there. MCS's mesocyclones could be forming anywhere along this line, and that would be for the potential tornado risk tonight, you know what I mean, in this line of storms going through. From what the GFS tells me here, it seems like it's marginal severe, so it seems like it kind of diminishes that threat a little bit, got a little bit of curvature in that wind field right there. So that tells me that there's a little bit of ability for some tornadic activity and some spin-ups that's going on here, but this doesn't look as impressive as what I saw earlier. Let's go ahead and look at the NAM model. The NAM model always usually overplays everything a little bit, and just, I think, can kind of, you know, anticipate for the worst case scenario. So, all right, so that's that line of storms that's just kind of popping up there at this point here. This is early in the period. I don't think that it's going to be, well, there is a little bit of severity to it. But like I said, the NAM kind of overplays everything a little bit, but it shows me in other ways accurately, more accurately a little bit, as far as forecasting anyways, what is going on in the atmosphere at this point. So you can see that boost in heat that's going up into the atmosphere, boost in moisture, which I showed you those over 60 dew points, a lot of, you know, just real wet sector over Missouri and Arkansas and that whole entire Arklatex region up into the Ohio Valley. Nice dew points and just a moist, wet, and stable section of the country right there. Got 2,000 in cave here, 2,200 in surface cave. The avid supercell development that's going on here, significant hail. I think that hail makers is going to be one of the biggest problems throughout these storms tonight. So, you know, you go outside your house in Missouri tonight, and if you're looking out, you know, towards the sky, see a little bit of lightning light up the sky, you're probably going to see a little bit of that that greenish tinge to the sky here, especially if there's some hail threats in your area, which is definitely possible through this entire area tonight. It's definitely possible for some hail going on in there. All right, so there's that that two kind of pronged system of one after the other, these training systems moving across Missouri and northern Arkansas. So you can see that tornado threat on the NAM, it boosts up a little bit. We got a little bit higher of a tornado threat per NAM right here. Significant supercell development. We got those that little bit of that curvature there that's going on. Not much of it, but a little bit of it. But you know, the wind is kind of high at those surface levels, which tells me there's, you know, sufficient wind shear in that area. Nice, really thick winds that are really blowing through and really ramping things up. That's going to be bad for those updrafts. It's really going to get things spinning. Got that break in the clouds there. Increase in moisture and heat going up into the atmosphere pretty decently. Hydrograph looks good. Got a critical angle there. So definitely a tornado threat there as per the NAM model. Let's look here, just kind of, you know, in the middle of southern Missouri, ahead of that second line of storms going through, and a little bit lower of a tornado threat here on the low end. Still got that hail threat, not very high, but still, you know, significant enough to possibly have some hail there. And I mean, when I say hail tonight, at the worst parts of the storm, maybe we're looking at, you know, I mean, up to an inch, I would say, in diameter. Worst case scenario, this right here would probably be, you know what I mean, you know, 175, you know, and 168, so something like that, you know what I mean. We're looking at, I mean, this is almost 2 inches, you know what I mean. Some of that is maybe 2 inches in diameter at the very most. But like I said, NAM tends to overplay things a little bit. That LCL is very, very low, that lift and condensation level, which, you know, kind of indicates a drop in pressure. You know, you're going to have that really wide drop in pressure. You can see that kind of wide turning that's going on in that wind field there with some sufficient wind shear that's going on in this area. Hydrograph looks good. Looks good for storms to roll out. Let's see on the, let me go back one frame. I want to kind of look as this is kind of popping up here in northern Arkansas. I just want to click right here ahead in northern Arkansas and see what the government, or what the see what the hydrograph says for the atmosphere in this area here. Got that wide breaking cap, enough heat and moisture going up into the atmosphere, a little bit of that downward kind of curving to the wind field here, sufficient wind shear for this area, and a little bit of that spread and wind barbs there, over 2,000 at surface cape, significant hail and supercell development. So definitely a tornado threat. It's a low end tornado threat, but it's not the highest that I've seen, but it isn't zero. You know, so that's a good thing that it's not a very high tornado threat, but it is there. It is, you know, it's not zero. Now we go forward one frame, take the same kind of measurement in the same area in northern Arkansas. We see a different picture. Now you can see that curvature and that wind field right here, where that wind shear is nice and strong at the surface level. Got that spread, that wide cap that's going on, that's breaking there, and heat and moisture. Enough, more than sufficient amounts, going all the way up to, you know, like 6 kilometers or more up into the atmosphere, and then gets a lot wider up at the top of the structure at 12 kilometers up there. Hydrograph looks good. Supercell development is strong. 1563 surface cape. So a little bit higher of a tornado threat going on as per NAM in northern Arkansas. And then as this line kind of trains and follows into northern Arkansas at that point, I'm going to click it right between the two lines. And this one looks like, okay, I'm moving into Arkansas into a more unstable environment. I don't know how I want to, you know, I don't know how I'm going to roll this out. That's, I mean, if I just kind of anticipate what a storm is thinking at this point, at this position, this is what kind of, you know, it tells me. I got some, you know, significant hail development here, supercell development, that is definitely apparent, but I don't think it's gotten to the point where it really is going to like start ramping up. It's at this point, I think it's trying to organize. Do have a tornado threat here. It isn't zero, but it isn't high. You know what I mean? Kind of a low-end tornado threat at this point right now. But as we go later on into the evening, okay, then you get these bowing segments of isolated cells right here. See how it's just kind of dotty? You know what I mean? It's a lot of dots to it, and that's those isolated cells. All of these, or a lot of these, could, you know, have embedded supercells in them. Then you got this little spot of what's going on down here, down at the southern end of it. I'm going to click this thing in northern Arkansas just ahead of it. Seems like it's a little bit more dwindling on the weaker side as far as the tornado threat is concerned on that southern end of it. But let's look over the border right here, right there in southern Missouri. See what the atmosphere is doing in that area right there. As soon as it loads up, might be a little bit slow. Sorry. Let me try it again. I think it's confused on the coordinates for this area right here. There we go. Low-end tornado threat, but it isn't zero. Significant hail development. I would say, as per NAM, when I was saying that it overplays it a little bit, if we're getting this low of a tornado threat, I would say that this is actually a little bit lower than what's anticipated in the NAM right now. But again, it isn't zero. I think a chance for some brief spin-up tornadoes at this point on the rear line of storms is definitely feasible at this point. While these two storms are narrowing together, you can see all that moisture going up into the air. I mean, this is where it's, you know, kind of trying to stay alive in its life cycle here. It's trying to, you know, struggle to keep going, struggle to get that energy, struggle to, you know, keep ramping up. And I don't think that it really has enough in this time frame to really do that. I went back a frame. Let me look going up into the border of Illinois, and then we're getting that. So that first line of storms is really what we need to worry about here, because it seems like most of the extremity, I mean, I've seen models where it looked both ways. You know what I mean? Like some of the models that we've looked at, the rear line of storms was gaining and sucking up all that energy. And in this model, it seems like the front line is kind of sucking up a lot of energy to roll out more extreme weather. So I don't know which one is really going to be more intense at this point. Let's look at the FV3 model. And we'll look, we'll look at this segment first here going into northern Missouri. Let me go back a couple of frames here, take a good look at the southern ends of those two lines of storms that are popping up. And so now you can see here, and this is in the late night hours of the 24th, you know, evening hours, going into the late night hours. And you can see these isolated cells popping up right here, little dotty, spotty cells right here. And that's where you're getting a lot of that supercell development that could be forming up here in southern Missouri. Let's go up and look at that. So we got that tornado threat with that significant hail. I got a break in the caps right here. Nice wide break, a lot of moisture and a lot of heat going up there. Hydrograph looks really good, and the wind shear is sufficient, definitely sufficient for some storms to roll out. That was just looking ahead of these little spotty isolated cells. Going into the next frame here, let's see which one that we have. And I mean, even off of these, where you're getting these little isolated cells, these spotty little things. I mean, that's these isolated cells, they're really the tricky part because you don't know what they're going to do. And a lot of times, in these storms, if you're going to have, isolated supercells and mesocyclones popping up, this is where it's going to happen right here is in these isolated cells. All right, so looking ahead, we're going to go into northern Missouri and take a look at the atmosphere just ahead of that. That doesn't, real wide cap there, and breaking the cap there anyways. That wind shear is really, really sufficient for that. For that area right there, let's look up in southern Missouri and take a look at what's going on up there ahead of those line of storms. This one's downplayed a little bit. It doesn't look like the wind shear is as promising, but it's directional, and it's, you know what I mean, there's no mesh or mix-up or any kind of disturbance in that wind field, so that might be enough in some cases, to get something rolling up, but, I mean, it doesn't really look as promising. Yeah. Depending on where you go up and down the line, you know what I mean? It could be, oops, I went to the wrong page. It could be a different picture. I wanted to go to this region here and take a look at Missouri as we're looking at this. Let's go back a few frames to those evening hours. This is kind of where we're at or where we're going into right now in the early evening hours as this portion of the storms start rolling out. Just ahead of that line there, that's that first line that's going to connect to the south and then connect with all this stuff that's just kind of spinning up right there, and that's where you get that second line of isolated storms, and a lot of notching in here. You see these little dips into the line right here. This is that notching that I was talking about, where you're getting little periods of inflow in here from that wind shear from those southwesterlies and that wind coming up from the south, just getting kind of sucked into that updraft, and you're getting a little bit of notching in there. That's it's not a good thing because it means that you could have some potential spin-ups, and it could be easy for the atmosphere to spin up some supercells out of these. Even though this looks like a lower end marginal tornado threat, let's look a little bit higher on these isolated cells right here. Yeah, that's where you're getting. I always kind of figure it at the southern end of these lines right here. Usually in the southern ends of these lines, that's where you're going to get the most potential for those tornadoes, is right down at the end of this line. The northern parts, you might get, some notching and some spin-ups here and everything, but short-lived. And when it's real wide and broadside, well, yeah, I mean, you got some tornado threat here, significant hit or significant supercell development, got a critical angle with a good-looking hodograph. So, I mean, but it's just kind of a wide, more widespread line of storms, but you're still seeing that round structure of, individual cells that are building up in there. So, it could be one or two or all of these. That could be some rotating supercells that it's embedded in this line, anywhere along this line as it continues on. All right, so then we get this next picture. You can see all the notching in there with these isolated cells, and it just, to me, it looks like just, this is a breeding ground for supercells. It just seems like supercells are just spinning right up off of this because of this the structure, this notching that you're getting, and these, individual cells that are all connected here in a line. Go ahead and look right ahead of this line where some of that inflow is going in. Got a marginal tornado risk there. It's not really on the highest level, and a little bit further up into Missouri, you're getting a little bit higher of that tornado threat, where it gets a little bit more, gradually more severe as you go further up into the north. So it seems like, right here is that most unstable, kind of area for that breeding ground. It's just, just right here in that northeastern section of Missouri going up into Illinois. That's where it really looks the most unstable. If we look at northern Arkansas here, it seems like it downplays, getting more wind shear, getting really, really beefy wind shear down here in northern Arkansas. That's the confusing thing. And with that curvature, that bending down curvature toward the surface, and a lot of wind in northern Arkansas, but not too much in the way of a tornado threat that's very high in these areas. There's some areas where you got a little bit higher of a tornado threat and significant supercell development, but it's not a really high-end tornado threat. I think it's relatively low. Damaging wind threat, I think, is going to be more prevalent in this area of northern Arkansas than rather tornadoes, which you could have one or two. Don't get me wrong. I don't know for a fact, and I can't say anything positively or definitively in any of these models. You know what I mean? Because you can't predict things like this. But I'm not saying that one or two tornadoes could not be potential in this area. I just think that the damaging wind threat is probably going to be a lot thicker than the tornado threat. And I mean, some of these isolated cells here where it looks promising, you know, you're getting tornado threats off of them, but they're not very high, you know, but you're getting a lot of wind shear and significant supercell development. In some places, you're getting a little bit of that hail threat, not very high in the way of hail threat. Some of these places, you know, 275, you know what I mean? That's 2 inches, you know, 2 3/4 inches in diameter, but I don't think it's ever going to, you know, be that bad. I mean, you might be looking at, you know, maximum size 2 inches in diameter hail, but that's pretty big. Supercell development is still widely associated in Arkansas, and as we go through the night, we're just going to have to see how it develops and how it participates. But I see lower end tornado threats down here in northern Arkansas. It isn't zero, but it isn't very high like we're getting up here in northern Missouri going into Illinois. This is right on the border of Illinois and Missouri, and you can see that's a little bit higher of a tornado threat. You know what I mean? You're getting supercell development is, you know, it's not zero. You know what I mean? So, and it looks like surface cape is 444 in this frame, which is kind of interesting. And I think it's that lack of wind shear. You're getting a little bit of wind shear down there, but it's not the highest wind shear I've ever seen. So, I mean, this storm is kind of confusing because it's back and forth depending on where you look or what frame you're looking at. So that's why I was saying earlier, I think it's one of those, it's going to be one of those nights where you might get one or two tornadoes that are, you know, significantly strong, but I'm not looking at the possibilities of wedge tornadoes or extremely, you know, devastating tornadoes that are long track. I'm not looking in, you know, at things in the way of EF4 or EF5 or anything like that, but I am looking at the possibility of tornadoes where you might get anywhere from an EF1, you know what I mean, to maybe EF3 at the very worst, but I don't really see it happening. I mean, because these are tornado threats, but I don't think that they're extremely high. I think that they're, you know, significant, but I don't see them as being, you know, through the roof like, whoa, this is going to be bad. You know, but the other things that we have to worry about in these areas is torrential rainfall. A lot of rainfall, very high winds ahead of these lines. You're going to get some damaging winds that are. It's going to be. That's going to be. You know, very apparent. And then the hail threat is. You know, of course, there. Thunder and lightning is also going to be in these storms too. So make sure you're up on your lightning safety. You know, don't be outside when this is going on. If you've got lightning cracking around and damaging winds, and try to secure your personal items, keep your pets safe, keep your, you know, kids safe and your family safe. Have that plan in place to be in a safe place when this rolls out. If anybody doesn't know anything, I mean, I'm sure if you live in the South, you know about tornado safety. Most people do in the South. You know, if you live in a mobile home or anything like that, please have an alternate route to someplace safe. A mobile home is the worst place that you want to be in a tornado. If you do not have a basement or an underground shelter or anything like that, please find a place in the center of your house. Put as many walls between you and the outside walls of the house. No windows. Stay away from the windows. Debris can come ripping through there and cause all kinds of injuries and damage and all kinds of havoc. You know, please be in that safe place somewhere in the center portion of your house at the lowest floor possible. Put as many walls between you and the outside of the home with no windows, anything like that. Try to keep your family safe. Get some blankets, get on the ground, get to the lowest point, and try to be safe, you know, tonight, just in case anything does in fact roll out. So this doesn't look like it's going to be a wide outbreak of tornadoes or anything like that. I don't think that this is going to be a devastating event, but I do think that there is hazards in here that can cause injury, loss of life. It can cause, damage and some debris and things like that. So definitely things to watch out for and be safe for tonight. I hope that nobody is injured or has any damage or anything. I hope it's really not that bad tonight, but I'm just trying to keep everybody prepared so that we can get through tonight and get to the safety of tomorrow. I wish you all luck, and I will give you further updates as they come out if I hear anything new. I appreciate you guys for watching, and please stay safe.